Good morning. I'll just babble while I'm getting set up here. So you already know my name is Cheryl Clark. And those of you that have heard me speak before may have heard me say something along the lines of, I'm really not a master. I'm still working on these principles. So when I'm up here, I'm really talking to myself. And you're all invited to listen in if you would like. So recently I've been thinking about the concept of gifted or giftedness. And it doesn't have to do with the fact that this is the weekend after Thanksgiving and the mad frenzy of shopping for gifts is now underway. Rather than that, it has to do with something that happened in this very room over a decade ago when I signed up for the foundations class, which at that time was the entry-level class for Science of Mind. And interestingly enough, Reverend Bonnie Allen Rice was the instructor, and she was our speaker last week. So the first night of the class, one of the students said, "I'm so happy to be here. I was gifted with the tuition to attend this class." And that phrase just struck me as so unusual to say I was gifted with. Don't remember having heard that before. And it seemed so strange to me that it stuck in my head ever since. So to me, to say that I was gifted with or I will be gifted with, when you're attaching the word with to the word gifted, kind of refers to me as what I'll call aftermarket gifts. Whereas to say in the present tense, I am gifted, I think means that I'm talking about what I embody as spirit, what I was born with. And this is the kind of connotation of gifted you'll find in the dictionary. It refers to those innate gifts that you come in with that can be nurtured during childhood. In fact, I heard a talk by Deepak Chopra. He was talking about archetypes in this particular lecture. And he said that during his childhood, his mother told him stories, lots and lots of stories, all about the Hindu gods. And so he heard stories about Krishna and Vishnu and Brahma, but not only those Hindu avatars, but also she told him stories about Jesus and Mohammed and St. Francis and other more contemporary inspirational people of the time. And all along she's instilling in him that the essence of these people, the archetype that underlies their very being, is present already in him. So we can see how his life unfolded with that kind of upbringing. Now we, on the other hand, are not typically raised to and reinforced in the notion that we are anything special, that we're gifted. In contrast, Reverend Bonnie was mentioning a couple of weeks ago that we're pretty well trained in not enoughness. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough to go around. I'm not enough, whatever form it might take. And that kind of brought me to this image, this tonal image of a toy piano that might represent how we express our lives in the world as if we just have a toy piano to play. But in reality, who we truly are, we're really endowed with a grand piano that we're just not using. So you might wonder where my interest or even fixation around the word gifted may come from. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. Because my childhood was quite different from Deepak Chopra's. I had a happy childhood, but of course there were events that impressed me in one way or another. So when I was in third grade, backtrack, I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, which is an upper middle class suburb of Boston. And the school district was considered quite progressive. And it's my memory that back when I was in third grade or so, the district decided to set up an AP program, an advanced program. And so they tested everybody to see who was going to be in the program. And of course, I don't know how close to the reality what I'm telling you is, what the real facts were, but this is the way I remembered it, and this is what impressed me. So I do remember being tested, and I remember that I didn't qualify. I was not put into the AP program, and hence I was not considered gifted. So that's kind of added fuel to the fire of second child syndrome, because my sister was considered qualified for the program. So I spent many years, decades really, feeling like I wasn't enough and that I needed to work harder to measure up. So for me to say I'm gifted in the present gets a lot of feedback. I have this other voice that's saying, oh yeah, right, you're not. And so I've had to do some work around that. And the only way I could get started was sort of kind of in the back door gradually. Started out thinking things like, well, let's find something I can say that I don't get a reaction to. So I thought, well, I could say, I am really good at judging people. Or I am excellent at seeing not the silver lining, but the gray lining. Or maybe I really know how to overeat. Got that nailed. So, I don't get any feedback when I make those statements. But on the other hand, they are kind of in the negative realm. So I have been able to evolve over time and maybe moved into a more neutral setting, so I would be able to say something like, wow, I am really great at cleaning. My house is neat, isn't it? Yes. My oven is spotless. Of course, I never use it, but. Or I could say, I really am great at reading. I read books. Or I have a great driving record. I have never had an accident yet, although I did back into a parked car once. So from there, at that point, I don't get any feedback with those statements either. And luckily, I've been hanging around here long enough to have become steeped in the philosophy so that I now have additional tools so that I can kind of move even further from those neutral statements. I'd like to just share a quote from Ernest Holmes. He says, "The greatest good that can come to anyone is the forming within of an absolute certainty of themselves and their relationship to the universe. Such an understanding teaches us that there can never come a time when we shall stop progressing, and teaches us that age is an illusion, that limitation is a mistake, that unhappiness is ignorance. This understanding of our relationship to the universe will rob a person of their loneliness and give them a sense of security which knows no fear, a peace without which no life can be happy." So when I kind of rest in those kinds of notions, it's pretty easy for me to feel like I have been gifted, and I feel a sense of appreciation. And from there, I can move into gratitude. And as we know, as we say around here, what you focus on expands. So as I focus on that gratitude, I begin to get more and more of what I'm grateful for, and that moves me into prosperity. So the Holmes quote used the word security and peace, and I just used the word prosperity. So this is my segue into the monthly theme. So the monthly theme, which is love as security, peace and prosperity for all. When I say those words, I kind of feel like I'm saying the vision statement for the organization, a world that works for everyone, or maybe the vision statement for this particular center, a world in loving partnership for the good of all. Now, some people say that maybe we're not there yet because we can't imagine it. Possibly. But, I think I can begin to imagine that world. For one thing, I know that people like the Dalai Lama and Mother Teresa and Reverend Bonnie exist on the planet. And I even give myself some credit. I think, I think I'm ready to work on behalf of a world in loving partnership for the good of all. I think I can do that. And I imagine a number of you could embrace that concept as well. Sometimes I think maybe we haven't moved faster in that direction because we don't want to. Am I the only one that's ever stopped to ponder peace on earth and thought, that could be boring? Yeah. Where would the drama be? Where would the sense of crisis and then the joy of the solution and the resolution be? That sense of accomplishment. Sometimes I think that maybe we're hesitant to get to that point because we think that's the end point. But I started wondering if maybe it's not more like a video game where you work your way to the end of level 1. You've mastered all the skills, you've collected all the trinkets, and once you're there, you're advanced to level 2. Something that you never even begin to fathom before. So what if your life was like that? That if you embraced all of your potential and reached the end of level 1 and level 2 opened up? That sounds pretty exciting to me. Now, science of mind allows us to recognize that the qualities that we think we need are already present inside us to make that kind of transformation. In the back of the textbook, in the glossary, there's a definition of the word prosperity. It goes like this. Prosperity is the outpicturing of substance in our affairs, but more importantly, I think Holmes says, we must receive, utilize, and extend the gift. Success and prosperity are spiritual attributes belonging to all people, but not necessarily used by all people. Excuse me. In addition, in the Bible, it talks about it being God's great pleasure to give us the kingdom. So we are, in fact, we've got this offer. We are being gifted with the kingdom so that we are already prosperous in that way. What if you really believed that? Wouldn't you feel secure and at peace and prosperous? And secondly, what if you had a really good handle on all your personal gifts and talents and a great awareness of all of your potential? Wouldn't you also then feel secure and at peace and prosperous? So getting back to my tonal analogy, Marilyn's going to help me out here for a second. Imagine that this represents you. And this is the potential you. So, let's do one more. Do you want to continue to represent yourself in this way? Or maybe or this way. Beautiful, thank you. So I have this sense that we go through our lives playing on the toy piano, and that behind this locked door, there's this grand piano, this far vaster version of ourselves that we could be playing. This is really the totality of the equipment that we have come in with. Sometimes you might be playing that small piano and not even realizing it. At other times, you might be playing that small piano and you can't really figure out how to get that door open to where the big piano is. You've lost the key, no pun intended. You might need to borrow a key from someone else, get help. You might need to just try to remember, now, how did I get the door open the last time I was in there? And all the while, you just need to know that you will get that door open again. You can do it. And you can just keep hearing the sound of that grand piano music in your mind. You know, my older sister, here's my sister popping up again. Did I mention before that she was qualified as gifted? She was a piano major, so she practiced a lot, and I think that pretty much every aspect of my life was accompanied by her in the background playing piano. So it's pretty easy for me to just kind of get quiet for a moment and hear piano playing, grand piano playing. Now we, on the other hand, if we sit down and want to play that grand piano, might feel a little concerned that things could go awry. But no matter what you do on that grand piano, you can miss a few notes. You can lose your place in the music. You can even fall off the piano bench. But whatever you do is going to be far more impressive and grander and more expressive than anything that you could do on the toy piano. So you are gifted. And I'm not just talking about intellectual or academic giftedness, but a lot of us, all of us, really remain blind to many of our gifts. And so I'm going to propose that rather than seeing a gift as something in a box that you haven't opened yet, maybe we should flip things around and imagine that we are in the box and all the gifts are out there in the universe as a potential for us to make use of, to find a way to discover and to participate with. If you noticed the quotes that were showing on the screen before the service, there were some suggestions in there about how to deal with that box, and one of them's real simple: get rid of the box. Here's another quote from Ernest Holmes. He says, "The range of our possibilities at the present time does not extend far beyond the range of our present concepts. As we bring ourselves to a greater vision, we induce a greater concept and thereby demonstrate more in our experience. In this way, there is continuous growth and unfoldment taking place. We do not expect to give a treatment today for prosperity and have $1 million tomorrow, but little by little, we can unfold our consciousness through the acquisition of greater and still greater mental equivalents, until at last we shall be made free." So how do we get ourselves to that point of greater vision, to see that our range of possibilities extends far beyond our current range of our concepts that we embrace? What's missing? How do we get there? Well, I say, look around. There are hints everywhere. And I'll just quickly review 4 things that have come up recently, and of course there are hundreds more. The first 2 I'm going to mention are things I just ran across in the last couple of weeks. First of all, I went to the art opening for Ruth Dreher at the Unitarian Church Gallery. And when I was there, I heard Ruth talking about Nicholas Roerich, who was a Russian painter that she wrote a book about. And what I heard her saying was that Roerich had this notion that wasn't enough to be a painter. You needed also to sing and to dance and to make movies and to make pottery and to act. You needed to do all of those things in order to be a whole person. Another day, I was going into my email to find the email that would remind me of what was that monthly theme again here? And I got distracted by another email which came from the Optimist Daily. So I clicked on that to read the Optimist headlines for the day. And there was this headline saying something about Da Vinci and creativity. So I opened that up, and the first thing I read was, "You are gifted with virtually unlimited potential for learning and creativity." And this was written by Michael Gelb, who is a speaker on innovation and creativity. And what he did was to study Da Vinci's writings and his works, and came up with 7 principles that he thought intertwined themselves through all aspects of Da Vinci's life. So here are the 7. So Da Vinci was curious about everything. He tested knowledge through experience. He trained his sensory awareness, kind of sounds like mindfulness to me. He was willing to release rigid beliefs and to embrace uncertainty and paradox. He developed balance between science and art. He cultivated fitness, balancing body and mind. And he recognized and appreciated the interconnectedness of all things. Gelb goes on to suggest that these 7 principles could probably help us in discovering our hidden abilities or gifts and to maximize our potential. Going briefly back to Chopra and his archetypes, he would certainly suggest that it would be possible to bring to life the archetype of a person, spiritual being that inspired you. And in the Eastern tradition, not just doing this by prayer or study, but by invoking the energy of that archetype through meditation and attention and intention. And the final area I wanted to address very quickly, because it's a huge work and I'll mangle it in the few words that I'm using, but Ken Wilber developed this thing called integral theory. And he proposes that each one of us has all these aspects of life that are simultaneously evolving, but they're quite different from each other. So he lists these 4 areas, first one being growing up, which he describes as psychological awakening, waking up, which is the spiritual awakening, cleaning up, and showing up. So going back, the growing up part, and this is where we all start. We all go through these stages as you come in. You're egocentric. You care only for yourself. And you move from that stage on to being ethnocentric, where you care only for your group. Thirdly, world-centric, where you care for all human beings. And lastly, cosmocentric, where you care for all sentient beings. In the area of waking up, that spiritual awakening, he talks about things like releasing your identification with your personal thoughts and your personal identity, releasing the grip of time and space, learning how to disassociate from your individual consciousness till you finally come to embrace consciousness as a totality. It's kind of lofty. And the cleaning up part, much simpler, has to do with discovering and clearing out of those shadow selves. And the last one has to do with the showing up part, has to do with multiple intelligences. And you may have heard about these before through the work of Harold Gardner. And there are lots of other intelligences that people now affirm exist, not just the cognitive intelligence, but also emotional intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, moral intelligence, musical intelligence, mathematical intelligence, artistic intelligence, kinesthetic or bodily intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and they even make willpower into an intelligence. And they say that all of these intelligences exist in us at all times, but to varying degrees. So you might be able to think of some people where you might wish that they were a little more intelligent in one area or another. Okay. There we go. So I challenge you to do what Holmes says and to receive and utilize and extend your gifts. You could follow in Da Vinci's footsteps by exploring something that you have a fascination about, or by expanding your sensory awareness. You could take Deepak Chopra's suggestion and try to see about embodying the archetype of someone that you admire. You could explore Ken Wilber's ideas about maybe cleaning up, discovering some of those shadow selves that sabotage you and cleaning them out, or maybe going into some of those multiple intelligences. Perhaps you want to expand your interpersonal intelligence. You could do that simply by making a new friend, or your musical intelligence by taking piano lessons from Mary Lynn, or maybe your spiritual intelligence by taking a class here, or learning how to do visioning, or checking out the bookstore. And meanwhile, while you're doing all that, don't let those ideas about not enoughness get in the way. There's nothing stopping you. There's nothing about age. There's nothing about resources. There's nothing about time. There's nothing about ability that needs to prevent you from moving ahead. And the final point I'd like to make is why? Why bother with any of this? And I think there are two reasons. One is that we seem to have this sense about ourselves that we need to grow, that we need to better ourselves, that we need to unfold in some way. And secondly, we all do, I think, seem to have this crazy desire to see the human race as a collective step up and become a better team player on the planet in general. So in order to make this happen, I think we each need to do our own work in recognizing the downright brainwashing we've had in some cases, the well-intended misinformation that's been given to us, and maybe in some cases just missing information, lack of information that's held us back, that's kept us in place rather than expanding into our superhuman capabilities. That place, that sense of us that knows exactly how to experience love and security and peace and prosperity. And I want you to know that you are gifted, and not necessarily just so you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, but also because the more we're able to embody that and have that acceptance of ourselves, that we are more able and equipped to offer peace to the world. So I think I've done a fairly good job of punching some holes into that box that I'm in, but I also think that it's probably time to put a new blade in the box cutter so I can really get down to business with this box. And if anybody wants to borrow this, you just let me know. So I love you guys. Thank you.